Good evening. Tonight, we begin with something that is as extraordinary as it is haunting, something that will echo across the halls of military academies for generations to come. Imagine this: 3 o'clock in the morning, February 18th, 2025. The Voronezh-Malshevo Airbase, 200 miles inside Russian territory, sits quiet under winter darkness. Row after row of Sukhoi Su-34 fighter bombers, each one worth $42 million, each one capable of carrying 3 tons of bombs deep into Ukrainian cities, parked wingtip to wingtip on reinforced concrete. The pilots are asleep in their barracks. The maintenance crews finished their evening checks hours ago. Air defense systems scan the skies with the confidence that comes from being this far behind the front lines. Then, at 3:17 a.m. local time, the first explosion. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. Within 11 minutes, 18 of Russia's frontline fighter jets are engulfed in flames so intense that satellite imagery captured the heat signature from space. This is happening right now. Think about that. Voronezh is not 10 miles from the Ukrainian border. It's not 50 miles inside Russia. It's 200 miles deep into what Russia considers untouchable territory, protected by multiple layers of air defense, radar installations that cost billions of dollars, and the psychological comfort of depth. When the smoke cleared and dawn broke over the smoldering wreckage, intelligence analysts counted the devastation. 18 Su-34 fighter bombers destroyed, an ammunition depot reduced to a crater, 3 fuel storage facilities obliterated. The damage assessment from the Ukrainian Defense Ministry puts the loss at over $750 million in a single night. That's not just a military setback. That's a strategic earthquake. This is not about a skirmish at the border or a tactical exchange of artillery fire. It's about Ukraine sending a message 200 miles into Russian territory that says, your depth means nothing. Your air defenses are hollow. Your sanctuary is an illusion. That message was written in flames, visible from space. And that haunting visual may be the most consequential image to emerge from this war since the first Russian columns burned on the roads to Kyiv. Here's the first hook you need to understand tonight. When a defender reaches deep into an aggressor's homeland and destroys strategic military assets with apparent ease, it's not just a tactical victory. It's a psychological inflection point. History shifted overnight at Voronezh, and Russia knows it. Let's step back for a moment and talk about what Russian military doctrine has always relied upon. Depth. The tyranny of distance, the belief that a vast landmass provides inherent security. When Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, he marched his Grande Armée deeper and deeper into Russian territory, winning battles but never finding the decisive victory that would end the war. The Russians retreated, burned their own fields, and let the Russian winter do what Russian armies could not. Napoleon reached Moscow, but by then, his supply lines stretched impossibly thin across 1,000 miles of hostile territory. The depth killed him, not Russian soldiers, Russian space. When Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, he faced the same challenge. German panzers raced across Soviet territory at shocking speed, encircling entire armies, capturing millions of prisoners. But Moscow was 900 miles from the German border. Leningrad was even further. Stalingrad became a graveyard not just because of Soviet resistance, but because German supply lines couldn't sustain that depth. Russian strategic depth, that haunting expanse of territory, became the graveyard of 2 of history's most formidable military machines. Think about that. For centuries, Russian military planners have based their entire defensive philosophy on one principle: make the convection. Enemy come to us. Make them stretch. Make them extend their logistics. And then, when they're exhausted and overextended, strike back with the weight of a nation that has more land, more resources, more willingness to endure hardship than any invader can match. That's not ancient history. That's the DNA of Russian military thinking right up until yesterday morning. But here's what makes the Voronezh attack so extraordinary. Ukraine didn't march an army 200 miles into Russia. Ukraine didn't send tanks or troops or occupy territory. Ukraine sent drones, small, relatively inexpensive unmanned aerial vehicles that cost a fraction of what they destroyed. And those drones made a mockery of Russian strategic depth. Let me give you the pattern we've been watching for the past 18 months. Since the summer of 2023, Ukraine has been methodically demonstrating a capability that military analysts initially dismissed as propaganda. Long-range drone strikes, not just hitting targets, 30 or 40 miles behind the lines, that's conventional warfare. But reaching 300, 400, even 600 miles into Russian territory to strike oil refineries, ammunition depots, air defense installations, and now aircraft on their own bases. On September 16, 2023, Ukrainian drones hit the Pskov Airbase, destroying 4 Il-76 transport aircraft. That was 400 miles inside Russia. Western intelligence agencies confirmed the attack, but described it as a lucky strike against inadequate air defenses. On December 4, 2023, Ukrainian drones struck the Voronezh Airbase, damaging 6 Su-24 bombers and killing 3 maintenance crew members. That was 250 miles inside Russia. The Pentagon's assessment: Ukrainians are getting better at this. On January 9, 2024, Ukrainian drones reached the Engels Airbase near Saratov, 500 miles from Ukraine, and damaged 2 strategic bombers, 500 miles. The Kremlin stopped, calling these isolated incidents, and started evacuating strategic aircraft even deeper into Russia. And yet, Russian air defense systems, the S-400 seconds that cost billions of dollars, the radars that supposedly can track a bird at 50 miles, the integrated air defense network that Russia has spent decades perfecting, kept failing. Not occasionally, systematically. The pattern became undeniable. Ukraine could reach into Russia almost at will, and Russian air defenses could not stop them. Here's the second hook, and this one's critical. The Voronezh attack wasn't Ukraine getting lucky. It was Ukraine perfecting a capability they've been demonstrating for 18 months, while Russia remained psychologically unable to adapt. That's not just a technology gap. That's a strategic paralysis rooted in the arrogance of depth. Now let's talk about what happened at Voronezh specifically, because the details matter. February 18, 2025, 3:17 a.m. Ukrainian reconnaissance had been watching Voronezh-Malshevo for weeks. Satellite imagery showed 18 Su-34 fighter bombers, the workhorses of Russia's tactical aviation, parked in neat rows. These weren't old Soviet relics. These were modern multi-role aircraft, each equipped with precision-guided munitions, each capable of striking Ukrainian cities with devastating effect. Intelligence reports indicated these specific aircraft had been conducting bombing missions against Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, and Dnipro. The Ukrainian military launched what they're now calling a composite drone swarm, a mix of larger Beaver-class reconnaissance drones and smaller kamikaze drones, all coordinated through sophisticated electronic warfare systems that jammed Russian radar while providing targeting data in real time. The drones approached from multiple vectors, flying low to exploit gaps in radar coverage, using terrain masking to avoid detection until the final moments. Russian air defense crews at Voronezh detected anomalies at 3:14 a.m. 3 minutes of warning, not enough time to scramble interceptors, not enough time to alert every air defense battery, just enough time to realize what was about to happen and be powerless to stop it. The first wave struck the ammunition depot at the southern end of the airfield. The secondary explosions from stored ordnance lit up the night sky. Then the second wave hit the parked Su-34 seconds with precision that suggests real-time targeting adjustments. Each drone, carrying a warhead weighing roughly 10 to 15 kilograms, struck with devastating accuracy. Aviation fuel ignited. Munitions cooked off. Within minutes, the entire flight line was an inferno. Russian fire crews arrived within 12 minutes. By then, it was too late. The heat was so intense that it warped the runway concrete. Satellite imagery taken at 6:30 a.m. shows 18 distinct burn patterns where aircraft once stood. Ukrainian intercepts of Russian military communications released the following day captured the desperation in Russian voices as they realized the scale of the catastrophe. "Everything is burning. Everything." That's a direct quote from intercepted radio traffic. Think about that. Ukraine just demonstrated the ability to destroy nearly $800 million of Russian military hardware in 11 minutes, 200 miles behind the front lines, using weapons that probably cost less than $5 million combined. That's not just cost-effective warfare. That's a revolution in military affairs happening in real time. And yet, here's what makes this even more haunting. This isn't the first time. It's not the fifth time. It's the latest in a systematic pattern of Ukrainian strikes that are steadily eroding Russia's ability to conduct offensive air operations. Every Su-34 destroyed at Voronezh is one less aircraft bombing Ukrainian cities. Every pilot killed or aircraft lost is one less threat to Ukrainian civilians sheltering in basements. The moral framework here: is crystal clear. Russia has been launching cruise missiles and glide bombs at Ukrainian apartment buildings, hospitals, shopping centers, and power plants for 3 years. Russia has turned aerial bombardment into a terror weapon aimed at civilians. What Ukraine did at Voronezh was strike a military target, the very aircraft conducting those attacks with precision that minimized civilian casualties. This is not equivalent. This is justice delivered with extraordinary military competence. Here's the third hook you need to understand. The brilliance of the Voronezh strike isn't just in the execution. It's in the targeting decision itself. Let me explain why this matters. Russia has somewhere between 60 and 80 operational Su-34 fighter bombers across their entire air force. These are not expendable aircraft. These are sophisticated, modern multi-role jets that took years to develop and cost $42 million each. Russia's defense industry, even before Western sanctions, could only produce about 12 new Su-34 seconds per year. Under current sanctions, that production has dropped to perhaps 6 or 8 aircraft annually. Ukraine destroyed 18 in one night. That's roughly a quarter of Russia's entire frontline Su-34 fleet. Think about that. In military terms, losing a quarter of a specific aircraft type in a single engagement is catastrophic. It's the kind of loss that takes years to recover from, if recovery is even possible. But here's where it gets even more extraordinary. The Su-34 seconds stationed at Voronezh weren't just any Su-34 seconds. Intelligence reports indicate these were aircraft from the 4th Air and Air Defense Forces Army, specifically tasked with ground attack missions against Ukrainian infrastructure. These were the jets dropping KAB-500 guided bombs on Kharkiv's residential districts. These were the aircraft launching strikes on power plants and water treatment facilities. Ukraine didn't just hit a random target. Ukraine eliminated a specific threat capability. The strategic calculation was exquisite. By destroying these particular aircraft, Ukraine simultaneously reduced the immediate threat to Ukrainian cities, degraded Russia's ability to conduct precision strikes, and sent a message that would resonate through every Russian airbase from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok. Nowhere is safe. Let's talk about the psychological impact on Russian military planning. Before Voronezh, Russian air bases beyond 200 miles from Ukraine felt secure. Pilots flew combat missions knowing they'd return to relative safety. Maintenance crews worked normal shifts. Aircraft were parked in convenient locations for rapid turnaround. That's all gone now. After Voronezh, every Russian airbase within 300 miles of Ukraine has gone into lockdown mode. Satellite imagery from the past week shows aircraft being dispersed, moved into hardened shelters, or relocated to bases even further from the front. This isn't speculation. Commercial satellite companies have documented these movements. Russia is evacuating combat aircraft from forward bases, which means longer flight times to reach Ukrainian targets, reduced sortie rates, and increased logistical complexity. Here's what that means in practical terms. Every minute a Russian fighter jet spends flying to reach Ukrainian targets is a minute of fuel burned, weapons weight reduced to accommodate extra fuel tanks, and pilot fatigue increased. When Russia operated aircraft from bases 200 miles from the front, they could fly quick strikes, drop ordnance, and return within an hour. Now they're flying from bases 400 or 500 miles away, which doubles flight time, halves sortie rates, and exposes aircraft to Ukrainian air defenses for longer periods. Ukraine turned Russian strategic depth into a liability. The very thing Russia has always relied upon, vast distances, is now working against them. Think about that. Ukraine forced Russia to abandon the tactical advantages of forward basing by making those forward bases death traps. That's not just clever, that's strategically transformative. But wait, there's more to this story. The Voronezh attack also exposed something deeply troubling about Russian air defense capabilities, or rather, the lack thereof. Voronezh-Malshevo is not an unprotected target. According to Russian Ministry of Defense statements, the base is defended by S-400 air defense systems, Panzer short-range systems, and electronic warfare equipment specifically designed to counter drone attacks. On paper, this airbase should have been nearly impregnable. In reality, Ukrainian drones penetrated multiple layers of defenses and executed a complex strike with precision that suggests those defenses might as well not have existed. Western intelligence agencies are still analyzing how Ukraine achieved this. Initial assessments suggest a combination of factors: sophisticated electronic warfare, that jammed Russian radars, terrain-masking flight profiles that exploited gaps in coverage, and possible cyber operations that degraded Russian air defense response times. The exact details remain classified, but the result is undeniable. Russia's billion-dollar air defense network failed catastrophically when tested. Here's the fourth hook, and this one cuts deep. The Voronezh attack didn't just destroy 18 aircraft. It destroyed the credibility of Russia's entire air defense industry. That's a strategic blow with economic consequences that will echo for decades. Now let's talk about resilience, because that's what Ukraine demonstrated at Voronezh. Not just technical capability, but strategic vision and the resilience to execute complex operations despite being outgunned in almost every conventional metric. Russia has more aircraft. Russia has more missiles. Russia has a defense industry that, while sanction-hobbled, still produces weapons at scale. And yet, Ukraine keeps finding ways to level the playing field through innovation, audacity, and extraordinary tactical execution. The Voronezh strike exemplifies Ukrainian military thinking. Can't win a conventional air war? Don't fight one. Instead, destroy enemy aircraft on the ground using asymmetric capabilities that exploit Russian vulnerabilities. This is the kind of strategic adaptation that military historians will study for generations. Ukraine looked at the battlefield, recognized they couldn't match Russia's quantitative advantages, and found a completely different way to achieve air superiority without ever winning a traditional dogfight. They're achieving air dominance through ground strikes. That's extraordinary. Let's talk about what those 18 Su-34 seconds at Voronezh were doing before Ukraine destroyed them. Because this isn't abstract. This is about what happens when precision-guided munitions fall on apartment buildings at 3 in the morning. December 29, 2023, a Russian Su-34 launched a KAB-500 guided bomb that struck a residential building in downtown Kharkiv. 47 people died in that single strike. Among them, a family celebrating a grandmother's 70th birthday, 3 university students home for winter break, and a doctor who had worked a double shift at a local hospital and was sleeping when the bomb hit. The building collapsed so completely that rescue crews spent 9 days pulling bodies from the rubble. January 17, 2024, 2 Su-34 seconds conducted a coordinated strike on a shopping center in Zaporizhia, 62 dead. The attack happened on a Saturday afternoon when the center was packed with families buying groceries. Security footage released by Ukrainian authorities shows the moments before impact. Children laughing, couples holding hands, elderly people carefully selecting produce. Then the screen goes white. When rescue crews arrived, there was no center left to search, just a crater and scattered personal effects. Think about that. Every aircraft destroyed at Voronezh was potentially one less attack like this. Every Su-34 burning on that tarmac was one less delivery system for the kind of indiscriminate violence that has characterized Russian aerial warfare. Here's the fifth hook you need to internalize. The Voronezh attack wasn't about revenge. It was about preventing future atrocities by eliminating the means to commit them. That moral distinction matters. When Ukraine hit Voronezh, they struck a military airbase. No civilian casualties reported. No apartment buildings destroyed. No shopping centers reduced to craters. Ukrainian drones hit military aircraft, ammunition storage, and fuel depots, all legitimate military targets under international law. Compare that to what Russia has done. Deliberate strikes on hospitals marked with red crosses, attacks on clearly marked schools, bombardment of civilian evacuation corridors, and the use of cluster munitions in populated areas. This is not equivalence. This is a defending nation exercising restraint even while demonstrating the capability to reach deep into enemy territory. That restraint reflects Ukrainian military culture and political leadership committed to fighting this war within the bounds of international law, even when their opponent has abandoned those bounds. Ukrainian forces have consistently chosen the harder path, restraint and precision, even when facing an enemy that recognizes no such limits. Every targeting decision, every operational plan, every strike is filtered through a moral framework that asks, is this target legitimate? Will civilians be harmed? Can we achieve our objective while adhering to international humanitarian law? That commitment to fighting ethically, even while fighting for survival, distinguishes Ukraine in fundamental ways. Fire has always been humanity's most primal symbol of transformation and judgment. When Voronezh burned on the morning of February 18th, those flames carried symbolic weight that transcends the tactical military value of 18 destroyed aircraft. Russia has spent 3 years bringing fire to Ukraine. Cruise missiles exploding in apartment buildings create fireballs that consume entire floors in seconds. Ukrainian firefighters have pulled countless bodies from burning buildings. Ukrainian parents have thrown themselves over children to shield them from flames. Fire, delivered by Russian military forces, has been an instrument of terror aimed at breaking Ukrainian will through sheer horror. And yet, here we are. The fire came to Voronezh, not to Russian apartment buildings or shopping centers or hospitals, to a military airbase where the instruments of that terror were parked in neat rows. The symbolism is almost mythological. The fire you send into the world eventually comes back to consume you. Here's the sixth hook, and it's deeply haunting. When the aggressor's own weapons become the target of retribution, fire stops being a tool of dominance and becomes a symbol of judgment. What burned at Voronezh wasn't just metal and fuel. It was the illusion of impunity. Think about what those flames meant to different audiences. To Ukrainians watching from cities that have endured bombardment, the fires at Voronezh represented justice, not revenge, but the elementary moral principle that actions have consequences. To Russian military leadership, those same flames represented strategic failure and the crumbling of assumptions that underpinned their entire war plan. To the international community, the burning Russian aircraft symbolized the extraordinary resilience and capability of a nation defending itself against overwhelming odds. One fire, multiple meanings. That's the nature of powerful symbols. In Russian military culture, the airbase is sacred space. Russian pilots are celebrated as heroes, their aircraft as symbols of national power and technological achievement. When Ukraine burned 18 Russian fighter jets on Russian soil, they weren't just destroying military hardware, they were burning a symbol of Russian military identity. Russian state media has spent weeks trying to minimize the Voronezh attack, claiming only minor damage and no significant losses. But satellite imagery doesn't lie. Commercial satellites operated by American and European companies captured high-resolution images of 18 distinct burn patterns on that airfield. When your government tells you everything is fine while satellite photos show your airbase is burning, cognitive dissonance sets in. People start questioning official narratives. Doubt spreads. Let's talk about what's happening inside the Kremlin right now, because the Voronezh attack created a psychological crisis that Putin's inner circle is still trying to manage. Imagine you're a Russian general briefing Putin on the Voronezh losses. How do you explain that 18 frontline fighter jets were destroyed despite being 200 miles behind the front lines, despite being protected by multiple layers of air defense, despite assurances that such an attack was impossible? You can't. There's no explanation that doesn't reflect catastrophic failure at multiple levels. Here's the seventh hook, and it cuts right to the psychological heart of this war. The Voronezh attack revealed that Russian military leadership has been lying to Putin about their capabilities, or Putin has been lying to the Russian people about the war's progress, or most likely, both are happening simultaneously. That's the kind of systemic deception that collapses regimes. In authoritarian systems, admitting systemic failure is existentially dangerous. If your regime's legitimacy rests on projections of strength, competence, and invincibility, then evidence of weakness, incompetence, and vulnerability threatens the entire foundation of power. Putin can't admit that Russian air defenses are hollow. He can't admit that the special military operation that was supposed to last 3 days has turned into a 3-year catastrophe that's destroying Russian military power. Think about what this does to Russian military morale. You're a Russian pilot stationed at an airbase 300 miles inside Russia. You watched what happened at Voronezh. You know that the air defenses that are supposed to protect you failed catastrophically. You know that Ukrainian drones can reach your base. You know that you could wake up tomorrow morning to find your airfield on fire and your aircraft destroyed. And you know that your commanders have no effective answer to this threat. That corrosive doubt is eating away at Russian military effectiveness right now. The Voronezh attack planted seeds of that same doubt in the Russian military psyche. And doubt, once planted, grows. The morning after Voronezh burned, phone lines lit up in capitals across the world. NATO headquarters in Brussels, the Pentagon, MI6 in London, every major power was suddenly recalculating their assessment of Ukrainian military capability and Russian military weakness. Western intelligence agencies gave Ukraine perhaps 2 weeks before complete military collapse in March 2022. Ukraine not only survived, they drove Russian forces away from Kyiv. After Voronezh, Western military establishments are being forced to fundamentally reconsider their entire framework for understanding this war. Ukraine is demonstrating military innovation and operational excellence that equals or exceeds what NATO forces could achieve under similar constraints. Here's the eighth hook. The Voronezh attack is forcing a global recalibration of military power assessments. Ukraine is rising in estimation while Russia is crumbling in credibility. That recalibration will shape international relations for decades. Russian air defenses can't stop Ukrainian drones. What does that mean for NATO air power in any potential conflict with Russia? What does it mean for Russian ability to defend strategic assets against NATO cruise missiles? What does it mean for Russian combat effectiveness against a NATO force that would be innovating in real time? The answers to these questions are leading NATO military planners to a startling conclusion. Russia's conventional military capability has been drastically overestimated, and the threat Russia poses to NATO territory is far smaller than previously assessed. That doesn't mean Russia isn't dangerous. Nuclear weapons make any country dangerous, but it means Russian conventional forces are a hollow shell compared to their pre-war reputation. This recalibration has immediate policy implications. Countries on NATO's eastern flank, Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, have been living with the specter of Russian military aggression. After Voronezh, that threat looks less existential and more manageable. That psychological shift matters enormously for regional stability and political decision-making. Countries around the world that have been developing expensive conventional military systems are looking at Voronezh and asking uncomfortable questions. If a relatively inexpensive drone can destroy a $42 million fighter jet on the ground, what's the point of building air forces based on expensive manned aircraft? If billion-dollar air defense systems can't stop drone swarms, why invest in those systems? This is more than an academic debate. This is a fundamental challenge to military doctrine that has dominated since World War II. Ukraine is demonstrating a new paradigm where small, cheap, distributed systems can defeat large, expensive, concentrated assets. Military strategists call this asymmetric innovation, finding ways to negate an opponent's advantages through creative application of technology and tactics. The Voronezh attack is a textbook example. Ukraine couldn't build an air force to match Russia's, so they found a way to destroy Russian aircraft on the ground using weapons that cost a tiny fraction of what they destroyed. Other countries are taking notes. Taiwan, facing potential aggression from China, is looking at Ukrainian drone capabilities and asking how they could apply similar concepts to their own defense. Poland is accelerating development of long-range strike capabilities. Even countries outside Europe are studying Ukrainian tactics and incorporating lessons into their own military planning. The global implications are profound. We might be witnessing the beginning of a wholesale transformation in how nations think about military power. The age of expensive, exquisite military systems might be giving way to an age of distributed, relatively inexpensive capabilities that achieve effects through volume, innovation, and operational creativity rather than through technological superiority alone. The Voronezh attack accelerated all of these trends. It wasn't just another tactical engagement, it was a demonstration of future warfare that military establishments worldwide are now scrambling to understand and adapt to. Here's what makes this extraordinary. Ukraine isn't just defending itself. Ukraine is writing the playbook for 21st century warfare. Other nations are watching, learning, and adapting those lessons to their own security challenges. That educational impact might be Ukraine's most important contribution to global security. So let's end where we began, with fire. With flames lighting up the night sky over Voronezh. With satellite imagery showing burn patterns where 18 Russian fighter jets once stood. With the haunting visual of destruction delivered with precision to those who have brought destruction to others. What does it mean when the hunted becomes the hunter? When the defender reaches out across 200 miles to strike the aggressor in their supposed sanctuary? It means that power is more complicated than we often think. It means that resilience and innovation can overcome raw military superiority. It means that the human spirit, when defending home and freedom, finds extraordinary ways to resist even overwhelming force. Think about that. For 3 years, Ukraine has endured bombardment designed to break their will. And yet, here we are. Ukrainian forces are striking hundreds of miles into Russian territory, while Russian forces struggle to advance even a few kilometers along the front lines. Putin invaded Ukraine expecting quick capitulation. 3 years later, he's watching his air bases burn and his military reputation crumble. Here's the final hook. You can invade. You can occupy territory. You can destroy cities and kill thousands of people. But you cannot break the will of a nation that has decided to remain free. That lesson has been taught throughout history, and Russia is learning it again at extraordinary cost. The Voronezh attack, for all its strategic and symbolic significance, doesn't end this war. Ukraine still faces immense challenges. Russia still has considerable military resources, but Voronezh matters because it shifts the psychological trajectory of this conflict. It demonstrates that Russian aggression will not go unanswered, that Ukrainian capability continues to grow, and that the assumption of Russian military superiority was always an illusion sustained by propaganda rather than reality. You can build the world's largest tank force, but you can't protect every airbase from determined attackers with innovative capabilities. You can spend billions on air defense systems, but you can't overcome systemic corruption and institutional incompetence that hollows out those systems from within. You can project an image of invincibility, but you can't hide satellite imagery of your aircraft burning on your own territory. The flames at Voronezh told multiple stories simultaneously. They told Ukraine, your courage and innovation are achieving extraordinary results. They told Russia, your aggression has consequences even in your homeland. They told the world, never underestimate a free people defending their sovereignty. But perhaps most importantly, those flames told a story about resilience, the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity, the resilience of democratic values when tested by authoritarian aggression, the resilience of hope even in the darkest circumstances. I think about the Ukrainian engineers who designed those drones, working long hours under difficult conditions, motivated by the knowledge that their work saves Ukrainian lives. I think about the intelligence officers who gathered targeting data on Voronezh, knowing that precision reduces civilian casualties and adheres to international law. I think about the military planners who coordinated this operation while their own families shelter from bombardment. That's resilience. Not the absence of fear or suffering, but the choice to continue fighting for what's right despite fear and suffering. The fire at Voronezh will burn in memory, long after the physical flames are extinguished. It will burn as a symbol of Ukrainian capability, Russian vulnerability, and the eternal truth that aggression ultimately undermines itself. Those 18 destroyed aircraft represent more than tactical losses. They represent the crumbling of assumptions, the collapse of illusions, and the haunting reality that justice, though delayed, eventually finds its mark. Ukraine didn't start this war, but with operations like Voronezh, they're showing the world how a nation under existential threat can fight back with extraordinary effectiveness while maintaining moral clarity and adherence to international law. The fires at Voronezh have gone dark now, but the light they cast illuminates truths about this war that cannot be ignored or explained away. Russia invaded a sovereign neighbor expecting quick victory. Instead, they found determined resistance, strategic innovation, and the resilience of a people who refused to surrender their freedom. That's not just a military story. That's a profoundly human story about courage, dignity, and the refusal to accept tyranny. And that story, written in flames over Voronezh, will be told for generations. I'm Rachel Maddow. Thank you for being here. Stay informed, and good night.